What kind of reaction do you think Luka gets tonight?
Howdy, Dan. It is going to be a surreal night here in Dallas. And look, this is a heartbroken fan base to this day. Certainly a lot of anger, outrage in the wake of the trade. That is starting to kind of turn into apathy. There will be nothing apathetic about the reception that Luka receives tonight. This is going to be a fan base that felt betrayed by this trade, that is celebrating 6.5 years of spectacular brilliance and mourning that it wasn't much, much, much longer than that. And then, the Mavericks as an organization, they're in this awkward spot, right? They dumped this dude. He didn't want out. He was closing on a house, his American Forever home in Dallas, lost his earnest money. Not that he can't afford it, but this guy was locked in long term to Dallas, couldn't wait to sign the Supermax contract. They dumped him in the middle of the night. They pretty much publicly shamed him on the way out. And now they've got to show some appreciation. You'll like these. Oh, these are classy. Should soothe any hard feelings. These are the shirts on the seats tonight. I don't know how to pronounce that last word. There's, Versi, I don't know. Havala sa Vise, Versi, whatever. Thanks for everything in Slovenian. Should certainly soothe any hard feelings. There will be, you know, I don't know how you say appreciate it, pal, in Slovenian. There will be a tribute video played, but let's just call it like we see it. This is going to be extraordinarily awkward because the only way that the Mavericks could attempt to justify trading a generational talent as he approaches his prime was to dump on him, was to cite the conditioning concerns, the culture concerns, all those sort of things, which Mavs fans didn't want to hear. Luka certainly felt a certain way about it. And then, Luka last night said he doesn't know how he's going to react. It's going to be emotional. He's used to being the enemy in arenas. He's used to kind of thriving off of that energy. As we saw last night, he's used to kind of going back and forth with fans on the road. He's not used to an entire arena wrapping their arms around him and kind of loving him up. And it'll be very interesting to see how he handles that.
If Mark Cuban was still the majority owner, does this deal happen?
Hell no. 0.0% chance. Cuban tried to talk Nico Harrison out of it, but Cuban got a 5-minute heads up. There's this, the equivalent of a handshake agreement on the deal by the time Cuban got a heads up on it. But no, when Cuban lost juice, that made this trade a remote possibility. And look, man, Mark Cuban essentially as the general manager of the Mavericks for 20 some odd years, had plenty of personnel missteps. When we can go back to Steve Nash, the Porzingis trade ended up being a dud in Dallas. They completely bungled the Brunson situation. I could go on and on. One thing he got right was that Luka Doncic was the guy to take the torch from Dirk. Luka Doncic was the guy to build around. And Cuban's strategy with Luka, to just put it bluntly, was to kiss his butt and make sure he did everything possible to ensure that Luka was happy in Dallas long term. And I think that's a reasonable strategy with this level of superstar. Luka's not the only superstar in the league who gets his butt kissed on a regular basis, but they went from kissing his butt for 6 years to stabbing him in the back in year 7, fresh off a finals appearance. There's no way that happens if Cuban's still in charge.
You speak about kind of enabling and kissing Luka's butt. You write the book, The Wonder Boy, The Curse of Greatness. We had Vincent Goodwill from Yahoo Sports on last hour, and he said, because I was asking him about this behavior that Luka has, that he has 73 technicals in the last 5 years, most of anybody in the NBA. And Vincent said, he's been enabled his entire life, probably hasn't been told no, and is used to getting his way. You were around him writing this book. Can you see any kind of relationship between how he's brought up and how he acts on the court?
Well, listen, a lot of superstars around the NBA are enabled, and Luka's flaws are as obvious as his talent. There's two main flaws. the conditioning concerns, which honestly is as much about diet as it is conditioning. Does the guy enjoy a post game brewski or twoski? Yes. His post game routine and sometimes the summer routine are way too similar to mine, which you can get away with as a sports writer. You can, but you know what's crazy? I was about to say you can't get away with it as an NBA superstar, but he's a 5-time first team All NBA selection who hasn't hit his prime. He's been to the finals. He took another completely different supporting cast to the conference finals. And that's part of it is like you could tell him, hey, Luka, you got to change your approach. Luka, you got to lay off the refs. Like the petulance is not helping you. But it's hard to say, dude, you've got to really change your ways when this dude was a legitimate MVP candidate before he could legally buy one of those beers in America. I mean, at the age of 20, he was putting up historically dominant numbers. His rookie year, he arrived and it was like he was an instant star and the ascension was quick. And it's hard to say, hey, what you're doing is not working when, yeah, it was. I mean, was it perfect? Could he have been better? You can argue that, but it's hard to say his way didn't work when his accomplishments at the age of now 26 stack up with the very best who have ever played in the league.